Okay, can you see the full screen?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. So I wanted to start out with just an update that our region committed to at the start of last year. HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, started a new initiative called House America. And last year, or at the end of 2021, they asked cities and counties and regions across the country to set goals for themselves, and set ambitious goals for themselves, and to report back. So throughout the year, we met with jurisdictions from around the country on a pretty regular basis, and talked about any challenges, but also shared our successes. So our goals were set by the Elected Leaders Forum. So for folks who aren't familiar, every other month, elected leaders from jurisdictions around the county get together and talk about homelessness, or learn about homelessness, so they can kind of report back to their colleagues, and staff will typically attend as well. So we reviewed kind of our data and what our norms were, or what our norms had been over the past couple of years in late 2021. And the body decided to set a rehousing goal of 1,000 people rehoused in 2022. So folks who had fallen out of housing, were experiencing homelessness, we wanted to rehouse 1,000 people, and we exceeded that. This may bump up a little bit more as data continues to be reported or updated, but as of mid to late December, 1,050 people had been rehoused last year, which is just huge. And if you tune into the Board of Supervisors meeting on Tuesday, you'll hear the challenge, which is many more than that fell out of housing in 2022. So folks who were impacted by the eviction moratoriums lifting, or fell out of housing for another reason. So I'll give you the good news and then say much the bad, and then go back to some good news too. That we knew that we had some projects potentially in the pipeline. Late 2021, we were looking at potential home key and some other projects. So we set a really ambitious goal for our region, which was to have 100 units in the pipeline in 2022. And the definition that we had for that was really that they were shovel ready, or everything was approved, or it was already being kind of developed. So what was brand new in 2022. And we exceeded that with 109 units. So that's huge. That's 109 brand new units that we did not have access to. They did not exist before 2022. So those are in the pipeline. And in South County, a couple of those especially would be like Veracruz Village in Santa Barbara, that's opening later this year, Buena Tierra in Goleta, that's opening later this year. So those are projects that are in the pipeline that are dedicated to our folks who are currently unhoused. So we are awaiting some of the framework for goals that we want to set in 2023 from HUD. I think we're meeting later this month. So we'll set new goals. But you may have also heard that the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness, which is 19 different federal agencies, they all work together and came up with a new campaign called All In. So they have developed this plan, and we're looking forward to more support coming in just the next year. I wanted to start with just that good, framework really of the work that all of the providers did. So this is that 1,050 people, that's CityNet, that's Good Sam, that's New Beginnings, that's Youth and Family Services, and I'm forgetting about 20 different homeless service providers who are PATH, who are getting those folks rehoused. So this is system-wide in 2022. But I'm here today to talk more about encampments, really. So for folks who aren't familiar, the county's Board of Supervisors in late 2021 approved an encampment resolution strategy and protocol. And I can send these slides to Catherine and Landon and folks after this, so you can get the hyperlink to the year one progress report. And this is going to the Board of Supervisors on Tuesday. But I have to give kudos to the board. They use their ARPA recovery funds, their state and local recovery funds, about a third of what they received. They dedicated to housing and addressing homelessness. So they did a huge thing. by saying, yes, we approve this strategy and this protocol, and we're giving you resources to implement it. So I'll walk you through a little bit of the first year. So that was back in late 2021, they adopted the strategy, including the protocol and team, approved an encampment response coordinator role, which I am now in. They dedicated funds for strategy implementation, beds, and units. So in part of that, just in that time frame, folks will hopefully remember Hedges House of Hope opened with some of these dollars, and additional beds will be coming. They also dedicate some of that funding to the Goleta Home Key project. So that was all part of these dedicated funds. In the first year, we've deployed the response team. So this is myself with homeless service providers, depending on the region. It's typically CityNet or Good Samaritan Shelter along with us, with fire, public health, law enforcement, and others, depending on the location. So that team goes out to assess sites. We approved a contract for sanitation services and removal of debris. So we work closely with quick response as folks are moving from encampments into shelter to quickly remove any abandoned debris. We now have consistent countywide use of mapping software. So we were turned on to the Fulcrum mapping software by some fire and police department or law enforcement agencies and other outreach agencies. We've expanded our outreach team. So this is all funded through the ARPA state and local recovery funds. And so we have countywide outreach that had previously been funded by COVID response funds. And as those came to an end, we were able to expand our outreach teams. We have new shelter and interim housing beds, some that are already online and some that are coming. In the next year and next couple of years, we're looking forward to more development of additional shelter beds, interim housing, and permanent affordable housing units. We'll continue to work with our partners throughout the county to develop memorandums of understanding to really formalize our collaboration. And we'll continue to seek funding to resolve encampments. So that's really just a snapshot of year one. And I want to highlight some of the continued challenges, but also the successes. So the continued challenges are really the lack of interim housing beds, and interim housing can be shelter that something where somebody is not going to be there permanently. So in Santa Barbara, if we think of Dignity Moves or PATH, so it's more of a temporary solution for somebody to get them from unsheltered homelessness into shelter, and then ideally into a permanent housing placement. But we do not have enough beds, as we saw the folks, as soon as we had additional beds, but really cots open just this past weekend, more folks came inside. So we need more of those interim housing beds. And I'll give another plug for the Tuesday board meeting. We'll be talking about some of the more specific sites throughout the county that are proposed or in development. We have a lack of affordable housing units. So as different jurisdictions, cities and counties are working on their housing element updates, you'll see the need for affordable housing units in all of the regions throughout our county. And then we see the impacts of approaches not focused on housing placements. So there are instances where there's just concern about immediate public safety, especially along our transit corridor, or in the case of the flooding that we experienced. We're not necessarily being housing focused there. We're focused on that immediate public safety concerns, but there are impacts as folks are moving to different areas and remaining unsheltered. The successes that we're seeing are those dedicated funds that we have through ARPA. SLRF is the acronym of the state and local recovery funds. So we have those dedicated funds, and then we were fortunate to partner with the different cities, Caltrans and Union Pacific, to apply for California Encampment Resolution funds to specifically to have an outreach team, which is CityNet, dedicated to the transit corridor throughout our county. We've expanded those outreach teams. We have new collaborative efforts with partner jurisdictions and agencies, and we have created new interim housing beds. Even though we still need more, we have created some. If you are the data nerds, then I'll show you just a little bit of what we initially proposed to the Board of Supervisors Our initial proposal was to assess 20 encampments in the first year. We actually assessed 380 encampments. And one of the notes that we have for the board next week is that this was what we proposed, and knowing that we would come back and reevaluate after we had a year of implementation. So we've realized we can do much more in a year than assessing encampments. And part of that was also differentiating between what we kind of understand as clusters of encampments as opposed to single encampments. So we realize now with that 20, maybe we were thinking there would be 20 clusters of encampments as opposed to 20 individual encampments. But in that first year of implementation, countywide, there were 961 encampments that were noted on our mapping software. So there's a lot of encampments throughout our county. We looked at the number of encampments resolved, and we noted all of the encampments that were resolved, whether it was through county efforts or other efforts. We do track any encampments that were once an active encampment and are no longer. We looked at the number of persons identified in assessed encampments. We anticipated 50 people out of the 20 encampments, and out of the 380, as some of the encampments were duplicates. So a person would move from one encampment to another, or they had 3 encampments. We did identify 231 people. And in the resolved encampments, we found 112 people. More data. I won't spend too much time on this, except to note that some of our goals were really how many folks can we, or what percentage can we move into shelter? Can we move into housing? What percentage of encampments will not be reestablished at the 3, 6, and 12-month mark? And then we want to look at the calls for service, specifically to fire and law enforcement. And this is county specific again, but we did see that reduction. And this is just my favorite slide that I always include in everything. Really, if you've got an elevator speech to make, how do we end homelessness, shelter, services, and housing, and how can we support our system of care now? We need more rental units, more sites for development, and we need to support our service provider workforce. So I will stop sharing. And I think, again, that the city is going next, but happy to answer any questions after that or now.
I have a quick question. This is incredible data. I'm wondering if you have it, if it's possible to see the data broken down by a regional basis.
Yeah, typically we'll zoom in. So I'm happy to spend some time on Fulcrum with y'all and kind of play around with the specific regions. I think you saw in one of those slides that I've just kind of did screenshots of some of the maps in key regions, South, Mid, and North County, but happy to zoom in and play around with that data.
And then, Lucille, can you, the encampment response, it's specifically to the 101 corridor and railroad tracks, correct? Or are you also working within certain regions?
Yeah, so
the city.
Good question. So that report is really county-wide. So that includes the areas that are unincorporated. So that's where we can send like our public health and our fire, as opposed to jurisdictional specific. So I know that the city of Santa Barbara has additional detailed data through Salesforce and through their contracts. I think the city of Goleta does as well. So what I presented is really what the teams that are contracted with the county have provided through Fulcrum and through HMIS and the Homeless Management Information System and the Coordinated Entry System. So if we're zooming into, like, say, the city of Santa Barbara, you'll see most of the encampments are along the transit corridor, because that's where the CityNet team is working on behalf of the county. But I think throughout Goleta, which the city of Goleta is using Fulcrum, so they're on our account as well. But you'll see in the city Salesforce, they probably have more detail in other areas, especially outside of the transit corridor.
Great, thank you for all of that. And Any other questions or last minute comments for Lucille? And as she heads into the second year of the encampment response too, we'll be updating everyone on those continued efforts as well.